Norman with iSaveTractors.com. In this video, I'm going to give you a walk around and an overview of this Simplicity 4041 Powermax Garden Tractor. Now this tractor is a big one. It measures in just under 8 feet long, just under 5 feet wide, and it weighs 1,300 pounds dry. With all the fluids in it, it is probably closer to 1,500 pounds. This is the largest garden tractor of the 1970s era. This was used on a lot of small farms or large gardens. It comes standard with a 3-point hitch in the back. This machine has a lot of unique characteristics to it, but before we get to those, let's talk about the engine. This machine is powered by an Onan CCKB 19.5 horsepower engine. This is a cast iron opposed twin-cylinder engine that uses battery ignition and points to time the ignition. This has a very unique feature with the carburetor. The carburetor is a typical side draft carburetor, but the air intake is actually uses a forced air induction system is what Onan calls it. So the flywheel housing is connected to the air intake, which forces air through the air filter into the carburetor with the flywheel fins. The engine also uses a full pressure lubrication system. So in this engine, there is a gear pump that pumps oil through the block and lubricates all the necessary components. It also has an external oil filter right here that you can change. Also under the hood is the 12-volt battery that runs the starter as well as all the electrical accessories on this tractor. That is just forward of the engine. There's also a hydraulic oil cooler that's between the engine and the operator. It's interesting because it kind of goes around in a circular fashion around the drive shaft, which is pretty unique. Here's the tractor dashboard. Has all the controls that you would need to operate the tractor. The switches in the center operate the 2 independent electric PTOs. One of the switches is for the front PTO mounted to the crankshaft of the engine, and the other switch is for the rear PTO that's behind the transmission. Both of them are controlled with electric clutches. These right here is a 2-spool hydraulic valve. The spools control an auxiliary hydraulic port in the front of the tractor, and the other one controls either the mower deck lift or the 3-point hitch lift in the back. It's interesting because both of these hydraulic spools actually have a float function, which is very unique. The controls on the right-hand side are the hydrostatic control lever. It's interesting. It's like a 2-lever system, so to push it forward, all you have to do is push the hydro control lever forward to go forward. But if you want to slow the machine down or change into reverse, you actually have to push that secondary lever, which is almost like a little brake. You have to push that and then move it backwards. I think that feature is very cool. It makes it very user-friendly, and so you can't accidentally bump it back to slow you down, or vibration can't move it to slow you down. Now, this tractor was clearly built to do some serious work on the large estate, large garden, or small farm. It sits tall. It has about 15 inches of ground clearance. The steering components and the front end components, as you can see, are huge. They're very beefy. All the tie rods and the steering linkages are huge. The spindles for the front wheels are 1 inch, and they have 5-bolt hubs on them, all made to be very, very tough. Now let's talk about the unique characteristics to this Simplicity Powermax 4041 that make it really stand out among the other class of garden tractors from the 1960s and 70s. It has some really cool features that don't really exist on other tractors of the same time period. The first thing is it has a 3-speed hydrostatic transmission. So it uses a Sunstrand inline 15 hydrostatic transmission that's mounted and mated to a 3-speed gear transmission, which then in turn goes to the rear differential. You don't see that typically on garden tractors. They either have a 2-speed transmission with a high and a low, and then the hydrostatic. To have 3 ranges definitely gives you a wider range of speeds and torque output, so you can really vary your tractor's use depending on the task at hand. Another thing about this that I think is the coolest is this tractor also has a final drive system. And what this final drive is, it's an additional down gearing of the transmission before it hits the wheels. Like, as you can see, power comes through the hydrostatic transmission, which goes through the gear transmission, which then goes through the differential, and then before it hits the wheels, there's this final drive, also known as a drop housing. Here, there's a little gear that turns a bigger gear, which then in turn turns the wheels. You don't see that on garden tractors. This is a feature that farm tractors and larger equipment have, and it's a way to give an additional down gearing so you can increase the output torque before the power hits the wheels. That is very unique. I have not seen that in any garden tractor of this time period. I believe it is unique to the Alice Chalmers and the Simplicity 720s, 4041s, 9020s, that tractor. And it is very cool. It definitely makes this tractor seem like a small farm tractor. And certainly to add to that farm tractor characteristic, this tractor also has this rear PTO that turns at 2,000 RPMs. That's kind of a non-standard RPM rate nowadays. Most tractors turn at 540 RPMs, but back in the day, 2,000 RPMs was standard. People would use rear-mounted snowblowers, rototillers, etc. There are still plenty of modifications you can make to front-mounted implements and put them on the back of this machine, and that's probably what I'll be doing for future projects. But to have this rear PTO is very, very cool. It extends the capabilities of this tractor by a lot. Before I show you driving this tractor around, let me show you some other neat things about this tractor. First, here's the 3-point hitch going up and down, so you can see the range of motion that it's capable of. The lift arms actually have 2 holes to attach the lower lift arms into, so you can have it either raise higher or lower an implement to the ground lower. Here's the oil filter for the hydrostatic transmission. These are 2 brakes. They're a left side brake and a right side brake that can connect together to operate both brakes at the same time. This helps facilitate tight turning. If you're like working a row in your garden, when you reach the end of the row, you can in theory clutch the brake, clutch the engine, and then hit the left brake, and then you can help take a sharp left-hand turn. Here's the clutch pedal. This will actually disengage the engine from the hydrostatic transmission completely when you push it down. This levers the parking brake. And these 2 lights on the dashboard I forgot to mention earlier is an oil pressure light for the engine, and the other one is an oil temperature light for the transmission. Now let's start the tractor and go for a ride. If you ever need parts for your old vintage and antique small engines that power your vintage garden tractors, like the old cast iron Kohler single-cylinder engines, twin-cylinder engines, the old Tecumsehs, the old Briggs, we're also working on complete rebuild kits for the Onan engines that power tractors like this Simplicity 4041. Those will be coming out later in 2018. For all of your small engine needs, please look no further than iSaveTractors.com. We are the leaders in developing the highest quality aftermarket parts for your old small engines, and we also carry a ton of OEM parts. My name is Norman. Thanks for watching.